Good morning, everyone. A good night of Shabbos. We are continuing here in the words of the Horowitz. Another new mitzvah today, Samich Zayin 67, mitzvahs aseh, positive commandment. Ladun dine mekach or memkar, for a judge to render judgments when it comes to business matters of buying and selling, be'inyan shetzifsa Torah love, in the way that the Torah itself has commanded us to do. Klaimar, what does that mean to say? There are times when a transaction takes place between two parties, and the transaction between the buyer and the seller will remain intact. It will be a valid transaction. And there are times when a transaction took place, however, it might be called something like a mekach tais. There was a misunderstanding in the transaction, and therefore the transaction will be invalid, and it has to be brought before the courts to be determined what is going to be the outcome. And there is an obligation upon us to judge between the buyer and the seller according to the mitzvahs, the instruction, and the laws of the Torah. And this very unique and specific commandment comes in a very specific parsha that we have in the Torah. And it says, when you sell something to your fellow, or you buy something from your fellow Jew, so then, says the Gemara, says the Horowitz over here, in that case of buying or that case of selling, if there's any questions that arise, was it a good transaction or not, you have to make sure that you bring it before the court of law, that they should determine if everything was done biyashris, everything was done in the proper way. Since that this trading and the world of transaction is something that is constant amongst people, it's impossible for a person to live even one day in this world unless this was taking place. Again, whether or not you are the one individually that is involved in the buying or the selling, or there are parties outside of you. For example, the store owner, he buys and sells his wares. So it's not for you that he's buying things from somebody else, meaning it's not you doing it, but rather it's for your benefit. So you also are the beneficiary of other people's involvement in the world of mecha or mekar, of buying and selling. So therefore the world cannot exist without this, and that's why it's so important that any legal cases which are brought before the Bezdin that deal with a sale, was it valid or invalid, is important that it gets taken care of in a quick fashion. When a person wants to buy land, there are three ways to do that. Number one, with money. Number two, bishtar, with a document of ownership. A person can have what we would call we would call it squatter's rights. A person takes over the land and he lives there for a certain number of years uncontested, so he becomes the rightful owner of that land. When it comes to movable property, ubehema, or when it comes to an animal, b'mishicha, you can grab it, you can draw it in towards yourself. The more so you can lift it up. All those things demonstrate that you're the owner of those products. This is a mitzvah that is noyag, that we keep every place all the time. That means whenever there are the discrepancies in a sale that took place between a buyer and a seller, it must be rectified to make sure that whoever is holding on to the object right now has the legal halachic rights to hold on to it, and if they have a claim against the buyer or the seller that it wasn't done properly in the right way, so then we should absolve the sale and we should put the item back into the hands of the original owner. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful Shabbos.